in Thomke's article about building a culture of experimentation. So it's slightly off. It's not strategy, it's culture. It's more about how we do stuff, and that's the definition I prefer for culture, is how we do things around here. And strategy, I know it's also a how, but it's more towards the what. And they talk about building a culture of experimentation. Well, I wrote about this in my book, Cultural Agility. And if there's the least favorite aspect of my model for my clients that have used this, it's got to be that. The pain of failure, the pain of the unknown, outweighs the good feelings, the dopamine of success. And the success is just not very often out there. And people really do have a limited amount of mental self-control to go through one failed experiment and then review it and go over it and have the lessons learned and then say, well, let's start again and let's throw a little bit more money or time or something at what we're doing. Thomke at one point in the article says, everyone in the organization. So whenever I hear always, never, everyone, no one, these kind of 100% words, I get a little nervous. But he says everyone in the organization, from the leadership down, needs to value surprises. Despite the difficulty of assigning a dollar figure to them and the impossibility of predicting when and how often they'll occur. So this is consulting fantasy. And the general idea of his article, saying, we need a culture of experimentation, we need to try new things out, we've got to stand behind that, because otherwise we're not going to make any kind of progress. So on that side, we say yes, but understanding how earning that extra 100,000, 100 million euros feels about this good. Losing 100 million euros feels 3 times or 4 times worse, the research shows. So we're avoiding a sort of 300 million euro pain to get 100 million euro gain. At least that's kind of how the human brain works. And so, you see many of these companies that make great innovations, great changes, great leaps forward. You get IBM with a Lou Gerstner, and he comes in and he's the big boss. And we need participating leadership, and we need, where do you see these things actually happening? Where there's a big boss, where there's an owner and founder. Steve Jobs comes in and says, we're doing this, Elon Musk comes in and says, we're going to build a rocket and we're going to put my car on the top of it and put it in orbit around Mars. No one would ever come up with this. So we need to tread very lightly here. Because dealing with the current reality of failure, and we know even in telemarketing, we know that if you ask clients questions that make them say no, it's much better to help them say yes later. So it's not getting a yes and a yes and a yes and a yes and then a bigger yes, can I have your credit card number? It's more no, no, no. They feel protected because they've said no, and then you get a yes because they feel like they can make a decision. It's on their own. They haven't been squeezed into a corner. But the problem is no one wants to use these techniques because you're on the telephone all day hearing no, no, no. And up here, this part of your brain says, well, that's right. That's logical. That's what the science says. But the brain down a little bit lower says, I hate hearing no all day. It's not worth it. So even though the article says that it's less risky to run a bunch of little experiments and get along, you really have to build up the organizational capability of patience, and dedicate time to this, dedicate resources, come up with a template. This is what appropriate experimentation looks like. Give people a experimentation field to play on, and if they're off that field, then stop them. Give them an idea of what it is to experiment, and as he says in the article, lead the way, show the way, be an example, and it's got to have data. Going out and just seeing what happens doesn't work. You've got to put data points around it so that it is measurable, it is replicable, it is hopefully generalizable to the business. Really important aspects of getting this going. Now he talks about democratizing it, sort of getting everybody involved. This is kind of like agile organizations, holacracy, distributed leadership. It really, I know I'm a little bit of a soapbox here, but it really overestimates how much people are dedicated to and want to participate in your business. And so I think that's a mistake. Here too, the idea of the business model comes in. Make sure that the experimentation is in the business model. If it's just something over here, and we'll get to that, some weekend with pizza, it's not going to happen. And he ends with saying, recognize that words are not going to change. A rousing speech, or a poster in the hallway saying, we're a company of experimentation, take risks, and this kind of thing. That doesn't really work. The thing that does work is helping people to see things. So if you tell them and assume that they'll take that information and they'll say, wow, that's really good information, now I'm going to change my behavior, that doesn't work very often. If you show them something, that gives usually the fuel and the sparks in the head for them to actually go out and do something. So help people feel and see experimentation rather than tell them about it. But this is I think it's probably the most difficult aspect of bringing that experimentation in. But when we're talking about digital transformation, we're talking about artificial intelligence, we're talking about a world that is changing from a US dominated to perhaps a BRICS or a China dominated world. It makes a lot of sense.